Hello, students. I want to apologize for the delay on getting the final exam uploaded and also the delay on this lecture. I'm going to abbreviate this and hopefully the PowerPoint and text will be sufficient for you. There are just a few things I want to hit on, so bear with me. So I'm covering child and adolescent crisis and trauma, and I'm just going to try to fly through this as best I can. I included this um, because it's really cute. I hope you have a chance to watch it. You may have seen this one a couple of years ago. Little girl says, "Worry about yourself." Um, but we actually want to say that with kids, too often parents in crisis or family in crisis will just tend to themselves and not tend to the child. So we're going to hit on some of that. Okay, so children at a time of loss, we are talking about death of a family member, classmate, pet, injury, or serious illness, divorce, and abandonment. Those are major damage to a child, particularly in the loss of a parent. But what we're talking about here is major, major separation, the severance of a connection of some sort, and not having the same emotional tools that an adult has, which is why, when a child passes and particularly a sibling, a lot of times the child is left to their own devices or the loss of a parent is left to their own devices as the parent tries to navigate. And that's why it's so important to come around a family like that. Okay. Uh, Never rule out trauma with a child. A crisis can lead to PTSD just as adults, but children will exhibit that in very different ways. Now, a childhood crisis will impact adulthood for good or ill, and they're because they are again moments in time which have transformed their worldview. So, two resolution stages are dealing with the initial response in high anxiety, but without the emotional resources of adults, as we mentioned before. Continued shock and anxiety, but with help, the intensity will decrease. That's attending to children. And I'll tell you this, that what we're talking about here with kids, they kind of, again, I may have mentioned this before, but when you're working with a child, they process things in little chunks. So it's kind of like I compare it to, looking at the sun. You can look for a few seconds, but you got to look away pretty soon. That is what you'll see with kids a lot of times is, they may get sad for a moment and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm going to go play. And you think, oh, well, their kids are resilient. No, that's just how their little brains work. It's just as devastating. So, uh, just as with any person, uh, begin counseling immediately. Gently and persistently deconstruct denial, but watch for flooding. And flooding comes out as throwing toys, growling, falling on the floor, depending on the age of the child. Um, Now, because of the egocentric way that a child thinks, which is just natural, normal, but children tend to think they can actually they cause the event in some way. So be sure to let them know that they don't take the blame, someone else doesn't take the blame. Just try to help them to have a more balanced view of what's going on. And don't make promises you can't keep. To say everything's going to be okay, it may not. It may not. So please be careful. Children, especially, they're going to hear what they want to hear and latch onto that, just as a lot of adults do. But they don't have the tools to reevaluate They're going to latch onto what they heard you say. Uh, Trauma, again, changing your worldview. The world is no longer safe, kind, predictable, trustworthy. And so attachment patterns will change based on the source of the trauma. So if the caregiver is the source of the trauma, then you've got layers upon layers. Uh, Trauma threatens children just as it does adults, and trauma memory is stored in the child's brain, but they may not remember the event. If we're talking about early formation of neural pathways, and with a very young child or an infant, the memory is still there. I hear client after client say, "Well, I don't remember that," so it's no big deal. Your brain remembers. Remember, Vanderkolk's body keeps the score. And I have done EMDR work with folks who have very early memories of trauma, even if they don't have the words, even if they're just images. That trauma trigger is hardwired. Children don't necessarily experience flashbacks. Now, when we get into adolescence, you may end up with that. They will end up numbing with parental abuse, and you'll see academic performance change in school, how well we get along with others. Don't be disturbed if you see the child using toys to reenact what happened. Okay, so this is daddy, this is the car, this is what happened. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is them trying to make sense of something that is just irrational. It's not it should not have happened. It's not in their realm of understanding. It's an invasion, just as I've talked about before with death as a severance. Time distortions are common. Well, mommy was just here yesterday. No, baby, it's been 3 weeks. You know, just as time slows down sometimes in trauma, and time can speed up. Kids are going to be all over the map. So be prepared for that, and don't necessarily, fall into a fear that something very major is going on. It's just very different for kids. Um, Kids need empathy. Not, I know how you feel, but, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry it happened. Watch the communication patterns. When we're under the age of 3, we're talking about nonverbal communication. They are going to need security, safety, love. Security for all. 3 to 6 is the magical thinking that I caused this to happen, or if I just wish hard enough, my pet will come back. 7 to 12, we're moving into more abstract thinking. And there's still a difficulty with the transition depending on all of the variables, particularly 7-year-old and a 12-year-old, very different, but we're at the two ends of the continuum of moving into that next level of understanding and capability. Later middle years, of course, we're getting ready to enter adolescence, and that comes with its own set of confusion. Now, do not speak grown-up words to a kid. You've got to speak to them in their own language, and be okay with I don't know. Keep it simple, single syllable words, very, very simple. Take a knee, get on eye level. This is a person you're talking to. I'm very much aware of how children are not treated as people in our culture, especially our legal system, and certainly in the church. They can be treated as cute little dolls that perform on stage for us when they hate to be up in front of everybody, giving them hugs when they don't want it, that sort of thing. I'll get on my soapbox about that. This is a person. You wouldn't walk up to another adult and say, "Oh, come over here. Let me give you a hug. I just met you. Back off." Um, some people do that, but I'm not trying to trash you. But what I'm saying is ask permission, empower the child, treat them as you would anybody else. Don't pretend you understand what they're saying if you don't. If you've got a 3-year old who's talking and you don't get what they're saying, don't say, yeah, yeah, honey, yeah. That's not helpful. Turn to a parent or a sibling and say, "Oh, honey, I am so sorry. I didn't understand what you said." And I tell my clients when I forget some detail and say, like, I'm old and I forget stuff. So that's why I write it down, or that's why I'm asking you again. Make it about I'm the one with the problem. Just because I don't understand you, it's my responsibility to understand what you're saying, and I'm going to do what I need to be able to do that. Um, Ask permission every step of the way. Is it okay if we talk about this? Um, and let them know what this is about. Um, I've got something really kind of sad that I need to talk to you about. Is it okay if we sit down? Is it okay if we do this? Now they don't need another parent, so don't correct behavior as long as they're not jumping off of furniture or something like that. Let them run around the room. It's their way of coping. Let them shriek if they need to. Have your earplugs, man. I know I've got 2 baby granddaughters. Let me tell you what, those are some notes that, but you've got to be prepared to let them express themselves in whatever way is natural to them. Um, Now, recognize defense mechanisms. Fantasy. Oh, if I was super powerful, if I was Superman, I could save whoever that was, or I could change that. My stomach hurts. uh, Projection. You're just mean. You're telling me something because you're being mean. That's not true. Displacement. uh, Taking anger out on a sibling when it's not about the sibling. Repression, suppression, sublimation. All of these, which we went over earlier in the semester, all these defense mechanisms, kids have their version of it too. Now, I think we talked a little bit about the therapeutic window. When is too much? When is not enough? Try to stay between the lines on that. Let them lead in the timing. Let them lead in what happens next. If you tell them something very sad, or if you've given them news that they don't want to hear, and they go, "Oh, okay, I've got to go," they're going to process it. Give them the space. I just told them right to their face what happened. Yes. Now let them go. Uh, with depression and what it looks like in a child, you're gonna notice things. A child who's very active may withdraw. They're not going to be satisfied with anything. Now, if any of you've been around a child that is overtired and they actually get more active, you're going, this kid should be exhausted. Why, or they're never happy with anything. I want a popsicle. No, I don't like that kind. I want another popsicle. Go with it. Just go with it. And if they lose control and flop on the floor and need to kick and scream and yell, don't try to stop them. Think of this as somebody who with an epileptic seizure. You're going to clear the path for them so they're safe enough to let their body do what it needs to do. Rejection, irritability, provoking. They're going to go start something with their classmate. They're going to start something with their siblings. Um, they're going to go kick the dog. These are all things that are going to happen. Um, so we're talking about physical, relational, lack of affection. All of these things can contribute to child depression. Look at all these. All these are about losses of some sort. Punishment, loss of a choice. Maybe it's what they needed, but there's still going to be some issues with that. Punishment is different from discipline. Let's just keep that in mind. Okay. When we're talking about abuse, keep your eyes peeled. If your gut's telling you something, listen to it. Better to err on the side of safety for that child. You're going to see isolation, shame. You'll see the interaction with the parents is if I ask a child a question and they just look at their parent, that's a red flag for me because I'm looking to, maybe it's that I don't know this, help me, or it's oh, I got to make sure I've got the story straight. Extremes in behavior, hygiene issues. When kids are sexually abused, they very often are bedwetters on into middle childhood. Reactive to touch, and there'll be the polar opposite change in the behavior. You're going to see big switches. Um, the severity of the abuse determines how much PTSD and how long. Uh, so I've just mentioned some of these rage they can't express in the home. They get out somewhere. Oh my God, I'm free. I'm with somebody who will listen to me when I talk, or I'm with somebody who will actually let me get out of the chair. Uh, Somebody who is not going to try to touch me in a way that I don't like. Uh, Children's crisis and divorce. Let me tell you what, the research that's out there, oh, kids of divorce do fine, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? Not so much. Not so much. Even in a situation where we're talking about uh, uh, parents that are screamers, it's a bad situation, there's abuse, for bad or good, there's going to be some sort of attachment injury in that separation. It may be, oh, thank God, daddy was mean and hurt mommy, but daddy could do better. It could be better. Maybe if he came back, maybe if I was better. All of those things are going on in a kid's head. There's a cumulative experience that builds over time. A lot of times you'll have kids do great right after the separation because somewhere back in there is this thing, okay, this is just temporary. They don't understand permanence. There are losses of time with grandparents. There are losses at school. There are losses at church. Then there's the syndrome called parental alienation syndrome. If you've got one parent that's bad mouthing the other parent, they say, "Well, my ex is trying to poison my child's mind against me." Yep, yep. And guess what? That's a no-win situation for a kid. If I don't go along with mom, if she's bad mouthing dad, or if I don't go along with dad, well, this is the person who's keeping me alive. This is the person who's supposed to be protecting me. Um, nip that stuff in the bud. If you've got influence in a divorced couple's lives, you got to shut that stuff down. And you're going to want to defend the parent that's being bashed. Don't put yourself in the middle, but just say, um, yeah, I know that mom's really hurt and sad about that. And sometimes she says mean things about dad. Or see, you don't want to get in the middle of it. Um, Unless the parents are open to doing some counseling themselves. Parental abandonment. My mom did drugs. She disappeared. She left me with grandma. That's abandonment, and that's going to be turned inward. Maybe if I was better, mom wouldn't use drugs, etc. Or maybe mom's still there, but she's stoned all the time, so she's not there. Take into mind the age variables. There's turmoil no matter what age. These are some of the things you're going to see. Clingy behavior because of uh, that scattered attachment pattern. I want to be close, but then you're not safe. Back and forth, possessiveness, anger, guilt. I'm bad because if I weren't bad, then right, whatever. Uh, Here are the emotional stages. I'm just gonna remember that this is not a checkbox one down, one, two, three, four, five, six. These can come and ebb and flow in all sorts of combinations. Uh, just as we talked about grief for someone. So bear those things in mind. Advice to parents. Sometimes it's okay to say, suck it up, buttercup. If you have got say you've got a spouse that dies, then that's when you're going to need to step in and help that parent be a parent, even in their greatest grief and pain, uh, and help facilitate when one of the parents has no capacity to be there for the child in the immediate days following. Do what you can to bring in support, family, bring in whatever they need. This isn't, again, I know this is my quote for the semester. It's not a one and done. Um, Give time and space for parents to feel them, but don't try to make up for the missing parent. Provide stability, be positive with your feedback with kids. Uh, so you're advising parents to be the best parent they've ever been in the worst possible time. Uh, be an emotional educator to help normalize their feelings and to say, you know, so many times you've got parents that are, uh, I'm a terrible parent in our culture. I have to be a perfect parent. Well, this is going to be exponentially multiplied. So it's at this point to say, okay, everybody feels like they're not the greatest parent in the world, but you're doing amazing. It's normal to feel that way, and don't let it sweep you under. Now, children need to be a priority in grief ministry. All the parents will take care of that. It should be a community around the child, just as it would any adult. Um, Educate the normal expectations in children and their caregivers, and then normalize, normalize, normalize. It's okay to feel this way. It's normal to react that way. It's right. Help them relinquish their omnipotence and let others take care of them. Help parents attend to the children to avoid their own defense mechanisms because children are acting up. They're doing the ice pick to the eardrum, shrieking. They're poking at the brother. All of these behaviors are going to escalate, and you've got a parent who already has no resources. Okay, capacity for grief. Yes, infants grieve. They have lost their the feeling from their parent, the heart, the care. There's more to it than just feeding, care, right? There will be sadness, and there's plenty of research that shows that that's true. 2 to 5s don't get permanence of death, so they engage in magical thinking. Again, think back to the trauma messages, and also God isn't safe. God let this happen. God can do anything. Just like an adult, kids are going to have some of those thoughts. 6 to 12-year-olds, you may have a 6-year-old that forgot about potty training. Um, and adults don't get death, so why would a child? Um, Watch for the different reactions, quick vacillation between emotions, confusion. Um, Keep connections, keep relationship. Um, Integrate their connection into their lives. Who's left, and how can we pull together? We can share our grief. Um, and of course, uh, referring back to Wright 376 to 377, allow the uncomfortable truth of what causes death. Lying to kids is just going to undermine. Remember, it's about age appropriate communication. Age appropriate. What is a 2-year old going to know? Your cat isn't coming back. Whatever, whatever the loss happens to be. Okay, give them permission to grieve. I know this feels so big. It's so big when you think about whoever was lost. So encourage them to talk and ask questions. Be available. They're going to ask again. Just, because it's not real. And this is the brain's attempting to make it real in some way. It's just like when adults ask, now, what happened again? There's going to be a whole lot more of that. Kids ask repeated questions anyway. That's how the brain develops. Allow creative expression. You know what? If there's a great place in the backyard for a mud puddle, take the hose out there and let them do it. Um, Create playtime opportunities, and don't hinder what's going on there. Oh, don't say that. That's so. Sometimes they're going to say horrible things. Now, obviously, we're going to protect them from being verbally abusive to one another if there are other children involved, but give them opportunities. Watch your expectations, dismiss myths. God needed another flower in their garden. Make honesty a policy. Let them respond in their own way and don't compare, please. Ever. You're the best daughter. You're the best you can be. You're the best Johnny. You're the best Johnny you can be. Well, why is she crying all the time? She needs to cry. Well, I don't need to cry like that. Yeah, it's different. Everybody's doing it differently. Normalize, normalize. Watch for signs of fear. What if I die? Encourage normal routines, structure. Adolescence. Ages 13 to 19. So this is that point in which I'm trying to figure out who I am. My body's doing all kinds of things that are really making me erratic. Um, and so control of emotions is all over the map. The last part of the brain to mature is the executive functions of decision making, planning, and impulse control. The mid 20s is when that finalizes development. This is why you hear so many 18-year-olds, getting killed on prom night, car accidents, drinking. A young man in my husband's church, four-wheeler accident the night before graduation. Just devastating. So, be aware of those kinds of things and the impact that it has, and be prepared to kind of come alongside and shield and guide without overpowering. Uh, Let them make mistakes that are safe. Um, okay, I probably wouldn't eat that whole bag of chips right now. I know you're upset. Okay, but let them. It's not life threatening. It's not life threatening. So they can, for in the immediate moment, they can make some bad choices as long as they're not life threatening. Remember, the teenagers need more sleep than children. Their internal biological clocks shift forward and they start having trouble falling asleep before 11 and waking up before 8. This is fact. Why is our school system set up for them to be at school first? That's another conversation. Christian faith in this culture puts them under a lot of stress from somebody sometimes being politically correct, hostile toward the politically correct majority, or vice versa. Let people have their own opinions, even if they're boneheaded in your opinion, because guess what? You've got some boneheaded opinions too. Um, okay, so this is where crisis of adolescence, um, angst is a real thing. The awareness of I'm not just in danger of losing someone I love, but at any moment, there could be a pandemic. There could be nuclear war. There could be no drinkable water. Those are things that adolescents are struggling with. Um, prevalence of loss of permanence in family and couplehood, when we're talking about broken relationships, and when a lot of families now, a lot of couples engage in serial monogamy or polygamy, polyamory, excuse me, that can erode uh, a teenager's sense of uh, continuity, security. I'm not gonna bond with this person because there's going to be somebody new down the road in a couple months, um, and therefore their capacity to have long-term loyalty becomes eroded. Rising death toll of addictions and suicide, and let me tell you, more is coming. More is coming after this pandemic. When kids get back to school, you're going to think, oh, it'll be back to normal. There's going to be a huge adjustment, and they're not going to trust what's happening. They're not going to trust that this is permanent. Okay, counseling an adolescent. I'm actually seeing a couple of teenagers right now, and I don't share their worldview on a lot of things, but that's not what they're there for. They're there for, one kid is there in particular for dealing with anxiety. Um, Another kid is basically being emotionally abused by their parent, and we can't step in um, unless there's actual full on abuse of some sort, emotional, physical. There's no clear case of that, but it's very poor parenting. Let's just put it that way. Um, Make sure that the adolescent knows that what they say is private. I will not share this with your parent unless somebody could get hurt. And that's something you're going to have to pray over. Using pot, well, you could get arrested, but is this life threatening? You got to pray over that. Um, your duty to report abuse overrides everything else. So, like in this case where I've got this adolescent that I'm working with, and what it deals with is she's a yeller. Okay, she lets the kid spend a week with a friend and then go spend another week with a friend and then spend a week with the grandma, and you know that's neglect in my book. But try taking that to court. Be your counselee's fan. So find what they love and you cheer them on. Emphasize the positives because they've got plenty of folks around them to be negative. And add social media on top of that. Wow, there's not enough people uh, backing up our young people. Be willing to text and actually do social media, but do not allow public posts. So, this is kind of a gray area. If you're in ministry, have a page for, your ministry, and kids can post on that. But keep it private. If there's some personal interaction, don't put that out there on social media. Um, Aid them in building a strong support system. Okay, don't do these things. Withholding. Well, if you don't comply, I'm not going to work with you. Incompetence, avoidance, glossing over, jumping to negative conclusions. What do you mean you snuck out in the middle of the night? Were you having sex? Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I just went for a walk to clear my head. Okay, that's what you got to go with. 391, what to encourage and be aware of. Be sure and dig into that. Causes of depression: loss, death, divorce, illness, friends, and brain developmental changes. Yes, we know that the adolescent brain, uh, it's it's transitioning at a faster rate since early childhood. Um, when 13 to 17-year-olds withdraw, that's something to catch your attention. They'll if they avoid or if they ask for help, uh, pay attention to that. You'll notice some more of the excessive fatigue, sleeping all the time, uh, sick all the time, concentration issues. Oh, you're just lazy. Please don't. Please, if the parent's saying that, you're going, okay, people behave in ways that make sense to them. They respond to how their body's feeling. Um, Try to be an advocate. Okay. Young 17-year-old to young adulthood is similar to adult depressive symptoms, but you're going to have more of that impulsivity, drug use, promiscuity, suicidality. Uh, Note the similarity in suicidality with adolescents and adults, but you're going to see more rapid shifting, uh, higher reactivity, turning on a dime. Look at the statistics on 400 to 401. Know when to refer. If you don't bond with a kid fairly quickly in a crisis, trauma, or grief situation, you need to find somebody who will. Don't let your ego get in the way. If the issues are serious and there's potential for self harm, do it immediately. Always safety first, safety first. Um, Recognize whether it's a problem or not. Check yourself. Green hair is not pathology, and parents' problems are their own. There's I think I mentioned that commercial where you got some people who are trying to train themselves not to be like their parents, and you've got this guy who's training them, and a couple of a couple of people are listening to him, and a kid with blue hair walks through, and he says, "We all see it. We all see it. Shut up. It's this is not biblically a sin. It's different hair. It's a color. Please know your limitations. Uh, Experience, knowledge, time, patience, and training. Look for Christian counselors who follow biblical authority with research based approaches. I think one of the students actually did some very good reflection on his uh, chapter reflections, talking about psychology informing scripture and scripture informing psychology. I am of the mind that God created the brain, He's the architect of the brain. And when we follow research, we're just basically looking at what God's design and we're learning it. And if we just go on our opinion instead of evidence based, well, we're just off in the deep end with whoever we are enamored with and their opinion. So, scripture lays out relational guidelines, but it doesn't give the how. And that's where research can really help. Uh, if you talk about dating, well, Jesus doesn't say what you're supposed to do on a date or what you're not supposed to do on a date, other than follow the law. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that kids who are uh, trying to behave in ways that are far ahead of their developmental stage, taking on responsibilities they don't need to, those kinds of things. We've got to be aware and be informed by fact and science. Science and faith are not mutually exclusive. So, I'm going to tell you to look for research that's been tested on a wide peer-reviewed scale. It's going to be a whole lot more accurate than, I know a guy who did this. Suicide, chronic issues of stress, or when the effects of an event last more than 6 weeks, that's when you refer. Any signs of a loss of touch with reality, ongoing abuse or addictions, listen to your gut. If your alarm bell's going off, it's time to refer. An overreaction to getting someone to a psychiatric evaluation is better than failure to react. If you've got a kid telling you, I mean, I've had students talk about cases when they're working with kids. Um, One in particular was talking about this kid was writing a graphic novel, so to speak, and appeared to actually believe the stuff that he was writing. Okay, let's ask some questions. Let's find out more. And if, in fact, the kid does believe he has a superpower, or is threatening to another kid, which was actually what was happening in this case, it's time to overreact. Okay, maintain contact after you refer. Don't just hand them off and forget them. Learn the history. Family and friends are going to fill in the gaps from what the kid's saying, because we're all poor self observers, and we know that we've heard teenagers say it's not fair. And we think, oh, okay, I know where this is. Maybe it isn't fair. You're going to pick up things. You've got to be a sort of a detective, looking at all the angles, getting as much information from the family system as you can, and people who are aware of what's going on. If you refer, uh, encourage them to get as much of the family involved as possible, and don't make it feel like you're breaking up with them, or that this is you're too much. I can't handle you. Here, let me give you a number. There you go. That was a whirlwind. um, and I just want to say, reading these last rounds of papers, I haven't gotten to your final paper yet, but you guys are really internalizing the material. I am thrilled to death at how deep that some of you are going. Just great work. And again, I hope I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in my next class. So take care. The Lord be with you.